Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we have a very special guest, Russell Dalgleish. Russell is also known as the tall Scottish guy and has had a thriving career not only as a serial entrepreneur but as an investor, strategist, director, and member of the advisory board at the Scottish Government's Board of Trade and Public Sector incubator called CivTech program. And he brings the experience of overcoming adversities to build a range of successful companies, offers a unique and challenging insights into the world of the private investor, and highlights opportunities available to entrepreneurs today. Russell is the founding managing partner of the advisory group Exolta Capital Partners, as well as an angel investor. In his early career, he has held board leadership positions with international companies achieving turnover in excess of 200 million British pounds. Today, he sits on the board of 10 companies and organizations covering technology, leadership, legal, and educational sectors. In 2015, he co-founded Scottish Business Network, which is now the largest business diaspora-based network in the UK and has been recognized as one of the top 100 most influential British entrepreneurs. Welcome, Russell.
Wow, welcome.
All right. So seems like you have had a very, very successful career. So let's go back to the time when you got started, and maybe you can share some stories about how you got into the entrepreneurial world, and what was that rise to this success like?
Well, I think if I go back to my childhood, I was brought up in the Scottish countryside. So my family had been in the same town for about 400 years. So I was the first to really go on to further education.
Oh, I see.
That led me into doing a degree in technology in the early 80s. Okay. So then I followed a standard career whereby I worked in business, in large corporates, first of all in a bank, and then in electronics firms. That gave me a grounding in business and an understanding about sales, relationships, and marketing. I went on to work in a number of turnarounds, and particularly worked in the US and Asia, particularly Japan and South Korea. But I think my entrepreneurial journey started probably about 20 years ago, when I started to invest in and work with early stage businesses. And that's when it became much more about trying to understand that market fit. What was the solution that we are trying to solve? And I think that's where my entrepreneurial journey always starts. So whenever I receive a pitch from a company, I always ask not about the product, but about the market. So tell me about your market. In that terms, I want to know about, is the market growing, and is there a large opportunity in that market that this company could take advantage of?
That's amazing. One thing I noticed is that a lot of people who come from the technical background, they find it really tough, and I face this challenge as well, to get into the sort of fluid world of business and understanding humans and markets and all that. So did you have any challenge going from a technology background into this business world?
Well, I think I did face the challenge, but it was probably the opposite of yours, which was I wasn't very good at technology. I was much better at people. So it was a natural progress to make, which was I would end up being in positions in technology companies where I did the interaction with people. So if I was to use an example, the 3.5-inch disk drive, which was at the center of all of our desktop computers, is actually copyrighted in the country of Scotland, where I am.
I see.
So before it went into mass production in the US, we developed some of the first hard drive technologies. So in the late 80s, I joined a company which manufactured a small form factor disk drive. And I was the first person in the company not to be an engineer, not to be a technologist. So my job was to answer the phone. So on my first day, I dealt with phone calls from the Russian military and from NASA. And I went on like that. And I found that my skill was being able to understand what the client was trying to achieve, and then to translate that to my engineering and technology friends so that they could work on solutions.
That's amazing. So I'm sure you met a lot of people who are trying to cross over multiple disciplines like technology and business and sales. Um, what do you recommend people? Should they stick to one lane, meaning should they become an expert in one thing, or should they try to get grasp on multiple disciplines and be multifaceted?
I think the first step is always the same. And I think you've been through this in your own journey. And it's about understanding who you are. So if you spend time understanding what motivates you, what drives you, what your moral framework is, and how you like to work and how you like to engage with people, and if you're very honest about that, then it will become apparent what you should do with your career. So when I look at myself, I am very much an international person. I enjoy travel and I enjoy dealing with international people. I enjoy challenges, which are going to be very difficult. And I'm very comfortable being on stage. So it was natural that I would take my career forward in directions like that. And I've found that today that tends to lead to me working with smaller companies, but also taking positions such as chairman. Because chairman is a wonderful role because no one knows what you do. In addition to supporting the chief exec, you're also the salesperson for the company because you can get out and talk about it.
For sure.
So I think always start with understanding who you are.
That's a very good point, and thank you for bringing that up. Now, you also brought up a point about international business, and I'm really fascinated by that because I being an expatriate and an immigrant, like I've seen how business is done in multiple countries, multiple continents. And since you have worked with people in Asia, in Europe, in US, what is your observation? How do people do business differently in these parts of the world? Do you notice any differences in how they approach things?
What I notice is that people tell me that we do business differently in different parts of the world. But what I have found is when you get to know people, we're all the same. Our first priority is our family. We're trying to advance our career. We're trying to achieve things. So once you start with that premise, business is actually the same everywhere. We have frameworks with which we operate by, legal constraints, and we just have to operate in that way. Where it becomes difficult is if you find yourself operating in countries where there is a lot of corruption, so that someone's word is not their bond. So I tend not to work in those types of locations. I've run a number of leadership programs in Dubai for people from Syria, Iran, Iraq, and different countries which suffer from countries which I have seen in the press have suffered from great armed conflict. But the problem with business is corruption in those countries. The problem is doing the service and getting paid. And that's something that I think is a blight. But it's also something that we should realize that if you're in a country like Canada or the UK, you're in a very fortunate position in the fact that if you do the work and you have a contract, you're likely to get paid.
Yeah, that's true. Now, again, looking at the world as a whole, and obviously we are going through a huge transition. What do you think is sort of the ratio of countries which are reliable and they have stable financial systems and political atmosphere and reasonable corruption? Because corruption, as we know, like it's everywhere. Do you see like it's like 50% of the world is suitable for doing this international business, 75%, 80%? Like, what is your view on that?
It's quite difficult to say, but if I look at the UN index on corruption for countries, there are probably 80 countries which are quite safe to do business in, and the size of the risk depends how far down the list you go. But it also depends on what sector you're working in. So if you are working in a natural asset like oil or gas, you can probably get that to work in most countries. But because I work with small companies, it's very important to de-risk what they are doing. Now, I would suggest by de-risking, entering new international markets is a good idea, And if you look at the moment, we are seeing different countries reacting differently to COVID. So that is something that gives us opportunity. So I would encourage export and encourage international work, but I would do it sensibly, try to de-risk it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, just a little off-topic question. So, I'm assuming you're pretty tall, which is why you got the tall Scottish guy. So, can you tell us a little bit story behind that? How did that come about?
Yes. So, I was trying to in 2012. I was trying to work out how to get a LinkedIn profile and a biography that worked.
Yeah.
So I hired a specialist and I paid her $500, and she analysed me. She did a lot of questionnaires. She spoke to my customers and she spoke to my friends and family. And she wrote a biography of Russell that I should use. So I paid the $500 and she came back, and the opening sentence was, "Hi, my name's Russell. I'm Scottish and tall." Now, as a Scotsman, I felt that wasn't really a very good return on $500. But then she explained to me why she had come up with that analysis. And it's because I spend most of my life outside Scotland. If you imagine I was at an event and someone said, "Which one of these people is Russell?"
Yeah.
Someone would say, "He's the tall Scottish guy over there." It's really intriguing because it's about understanding how other people see us. And it's the same with companies. It's not enough to say, "My product's great, you should buy it." You have to understand what the other person is trying to achieve and how they see you. So I use being Scottish as an asset, because the actual, if you think about the brand that goes with being Scottish, it's a positive brand. So it's a brand about reliability, hard working, probably quite good fun. So it's a positive brand. So it works well.
Yeah. And what about Scotch? Isn't Scotch from Scotland as well?
I'm sorry, say again?
Scotch whiskey.
Yes, yeah. So there's whiskey as well. So the other name you could say is that I'm the Scotsman that doesn't drink alcohol. So that makes me slightly unusual as well.
All right, great. So let's move on. So from entrepreneurial work, you became an influencer and investor. So how was that journey? How was that transition for you?
It's really interesting because I love the energy that comes with an entrepreneur. I love the growing the business, taking on new challenges and accomplishing things while taking risks. I love that world. I think, though, that what we have to do is we have to ensure that our entrepreneurs receive the support they need. So one of the challenges in the UK, for example, is that the advisors who would work with an entrepreneur may work locally to that individual. They may know the person, they may know the local markets. So they're not the best people, perhaps, to advise how to enter Canada or Brazil or Japanese markets. So this is one of the reasons why I've built a global network of about 10,000 people who are senior execs in business who are willing to give up their time to help companies. Now, because I'm Scottish, I've built this whole network full of Scottish people. So it's people with an interest in the country. So I think that's the key, is getting the right help to the entrepreneur.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. Like, there's a general convention that people who are successful, people, who are CEOs of, successful companies, they are not very available, approachable, or, they don't have a lot of time to help other people. So is that a misconception? What are your views about that?
That is a total myth. Mm-hmm. So what I discover is the more senior the individual is, the faster they respond. And let me give you an example. So about 5 years ago, I was helping an 18-year-old young man who wanted to put on a conference in San Francisco. So he lived in the UK, but we had this idea to put on a conference in San Francisco, a great challenge, a really difficult thing to do. Yeah. So he decided that it would be wonderful if we could get Apple involved. I see. So what we did was we wrote to Tim Cook. So Tim Cook at that point was the most senior chief exec in the world. Apple is the largest company.
Yeah.
So the assumption would be that's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But we got a response. So we
Wow.
got a response from Tim Cook. Now, I'm not silly, right? I don't think it was actually Tim Cook, but it was maybe his assistant.
Yeah.
And the letter they sent, the email they sent said, Dear Russell and Bruce, I wish you every success with your event, but I, Tim Cook, are too busy running Apple to attend the event. Now, that's a wonderful response. It's on brand for Apple, and we took it and we put it on our website, along with a picture of Bill Gates, who also. So we did this.
Awesome.
However, the letter from Tim Cook changed my life because the second paragraph said, we have another British person here called Jonathan Ives, and I've passed on your details to him. Now, that gentleman's better known as Sir Johnny Ives, the design authority at Apple for 22 years. So we thought, that's quite nice. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So what happened was 8 hours later, my telephone rang. And it was a gentleman phoned up and said, basically, I'm Johnny Ives, exec assistant and head of the design lab here at Apple. Who the hell are you? I've just received an email from Tim Cook saying to phone you. So then we built a relationship with this individual and we did some good work and we got the chance to visit Apple when we were out in Silicon Valley, which was quite unusual. Yeah. And what that told me was we have to stop qualifying ourselves out of opportunities because of people's job titles. And we just have to reach out and ask them. They're just people the same as same as ourselves. And there's never been a better time to do it now with products such as LinkedIn. Yeah. You can just write straight to someone.
Yeah. In fact, that's how I met you as well, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's also talk about some of your investing activities. So, you are helping a lot of people, but how do you invest? How do you pick your companies? What is your criteria, and how do you work with the founders that you invest in?
The key is the individual. So what I do is I spend time getting to know the individual and getting to know the market. That's my key. If we have someone who has the drive, the knowledge, and the capability to do something, and it's an interesting market which we think will grow, then that's a great area for me to work in. So that's the starting point. Then we try to design out a business model, and then we go for it. And we use the network of connections to come in and help. And I'm a great believer in asking people for help, because there's no reason why we have to do all this ourselves. Now, I'm very fortunate that today I have a very large network, but I also know that if you ask someone to help, they will typically say yes. Now, I've done a lot of work round about the word belonging. So as human beings, we have a desire typically to belong to something. Now, we may belong to a football team, or we may know who we support, or we may belong to a country, or we may belong to a golf club, but we have a desire to belong. Now, I work quite heavily in this area to belong about where you are from, where you spent your childhood, or where you studied. And what I've realized is that if I'm working with an early stage business from Glasgow in Scotland, and I believe there is a senior exec who could help them, who is also from Glasgow, I know that even though I don't know the person, I know they will help if I ask. If I say, hi, really impressed with what you've done with your career. I've got a young Glasgow business here. Would you spare 5 minutes to give them some advice? 100% of the time, that individual will say yes. And they will also thank me for the opportunity. It's wonderful. So I think that understanding belonging and understanding what motivates someone is so important.
That's very true. That's very true. Now, one of the things I have noticed, because I work with many startups myself, and I've noticed this trend, especially in the US, where most of the time is spent in looking for investors, investments, raising money, rather than focusing on building a business. And also, I noticed that, obviously the attention is diverted towards raising money, but then once the money is raised, the investors are always sort of interfering in the work, like making sure that their vision is carried out rather than the company's business model and whatnot. So what are your views around that? Like, how do you notice these type of trends in the industry?
I think working with an investor, you have to put much more thought into it. So I work with a lot of early stage businesses who only see money.
Yeah.
So if someone's going to give, they think, so someone phoned me a month ago and said that they had just received $250,000 worth of investment for 10% of their company, and they were sitting drinking champagne to celebrate. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you've just lost 10% of your company." That's not what happened. And they went, no, that's really good. Because if you think about this, if the money comes with a person or an organization that's going to enable you to succeed, then that's a great idea. So I worked with a company called TickX, TICKX in Manchester, and they spent a long time trying to raise some initial seed funding. And what they do is they sell concert tickets for music venues. And eventually they found the best investor, which was a British record label called Ministry of Sound. Okay. So suddenly they're selling they're selling tickets for rock concerts, and their investor's a record label. That makes complete sense. You and I would say that's sensible. The thing to think about with an investor is, if you think about your company as your house, when you give up some of your equity to an investor, it's like you selling your bedroom. Yeah. So you've sold the bedroom in your house, and when you go for breakfast, this investor is going to be sitting there in your house. He now owns part of your house. So think really carefully about who you're going to work with. Make sure you get to know them, and don't beg for the money. Make the investor want to work with you. That's the way to do it. Exactly. And don't prove the model first before you try and raise the money. And give up your. Do you know that? It must be about 30 years ago. We did we did a startup, and we funded the entire startup on 50 credit cards. So we got 50 credit cards, raised the money on the credit cards, and knew we had to get to revenue quickly enough to cover the interest payments. And we took the credit cards and we put rubber bands around them and we stuck them on the table. And that's the way we used to do it. We would take on debt as a way to fund our businesses. 30 years ago, we didn't give up equity without a gun at our head.
Yeah, I mean, not only 30 years ago, because I've seen businesses being built like traditionally. That's how you do it, right? Like you figure out what is the junk you can sell to raise a little bit of money to buy the product that you can sell or whatever, right? This whole trend of just constantly looking for money is a foreign concept. So I found it very interesting when I worked with founders like that. Anyway, you nailed it. I think you gave a very good framework for people to follow to build their business and raise the money. Now let's move on to your network of Scottish people. You already talked about it, but let's dive a little bit deeper. Like, how did you conceive of this network, and how did it come about? I'm sure it was challenging to build this network of 10,000. How many businesses you have?
10,000 individuals in 76 countries. So it was actually really easy because all we decided to do was to start. Okay. So what I would encourage everybody watching this program, this episode to do is to start. To start, you do one thing. So myself and my co-founder, Christine Essen, who was an economic development professional, we decided to start Scottish Business Network in London as a way to bring together people who were Scottish in business. And we said, well, we've got no money, so we'll start by having a meeting. Okay. So we got someone in a big company to give us a boardroom to have the meeting in. Right. Then we started to invite friends, and they all said they would come. And then the company said, this looks like a really interesting thing you're doing, Russell and Christine. Would it help if we provided canapes and wine?
Oh, wow.
And we said, yes, that would be a great idea. Yeah. I think everyone would love that. And then at the last minute, the company was Aberdeen Standard Investments, and their chief exec heard what we were doing, and he said, could he come and speak at the event since we were in his office? And we said, yes. Yeah. So very quickly, we went from a small idea, taking step and step and step. We built a model. So our model was now, we will have events every month. We will phone up large companies and we will ask them to supply canopies and wine. And they all said yes. We did an event in one of the largest, the top floor of one of these huge towers in London. And we had wine waiters handing out the wine. It was amazing. And it was just, we couldn't be asked. But what really happened was after a year, we got some publicity, and people who were interested in Scotland around the world started contacting us and asked, could they get involved? So suddenly we built out this network. We built it out through LinkedIn, through Zoom, through Microsoft Teams, through holding events and bringing people together. But the magical thing was we allowed people to help. So rather than having a plan and saying, this is how we're going to do it, we want to be in power, we instead encouraged our members to come up with ideas. So one of our members built our website. One of our members designed all of our marketing. One of our members selected our technology. One of our members supplies our technology. And then in the last year, we have seen an explosion because Scots in different cities around the world have said, could I be your ambassador, Russell? I want to represent Scottish Business Network in Atlanta or in Washington or in Canberra. And we said, well, we'd never thought of that. Okay, let's do that. And it's allowed an explosion. So where we are now going is we will build the largest integrated network of, it's called a diaspora. So people interested in a country. We will build the largest integrated network on the planet with one piece of AI technology accessible to any Scottish company, which will tell you who you should speak to around the world. And we will have representatives in every city on the planet who will be there to help. And then we will build out additional services.
That's amazing. Now,
and the thing about it is everyone loves it.
That's amazing. Amazing story. So absolutely love it how you built it and just grew it organically. One thing I want to ask is why limited to Scottish? And I know, obviously you are a Scottish tall guy. Why limited to only Scottish businesses, not open it up to other businesses?
I think with any product, you've got to know your market. So people who have a belonging to Scotland have similar characteristics. And these are characteristics that I understand because I am Scottish and I live in Scotland. Whereas if I was working with people in France or people who are in England even, I don't understand that. It's not ingrained in me. So I will give you an example. So Scotland's most famous sports person is Andy Murray, the tennis player. That's our most famous, right? So during Wimbledon, when Andy Murray was playing, I could phone any Scottish person around the world in our network who I spoke to. The conversation started with, "Oh, how's Andy Murray's knee? How's he getting on?" So there's a cultural piece there. So that's why we've decided to focus on Scotland as the way to do it.
That makes sense. And now, obviously, you've given a lot of nuggets for people to digest and use in their businesses. But I'm sure during your entrepreneurial journey, you had a lot of challenges. Maybe you made some mistakes. Can we share a little bit of that side as well, where you had to overcome some challenges or you had to rectify some mistakes, some disasters, whatever, so that people can get a feel for how things work in real life?
So there are two pieces of advice I have. The first piece about is how do we deal with failure? So I've invested too heavily in a number of deals and I've lost a lot of money. So on the day I lose the money, I'm very unhappy and very angry. But what I do the next day is I work out how much money I lost. So I work out the actual number. And then I make the agreement that the next deal I do has to make money plus this. So I have to make it back. The other thing I do is I surround myself with the best team in the world. So I have the best finance director, the best legal company, the best. And because I have these individuals who agree to work with me for free because they're part of these networks, I'm protected. Because where businesses fail is not because of poor market fit or a bad business plan. Businesses fail because poor financial control, poor HR control, no insurance. That's why they fail. And it's having the basic building blocks is absolutely essential. So that's what I would encourage everyone is start building this incredible team round about you. Every company requires to have a chief financial officer or finance director. I don't care if he only works 1 hour a week, 1 hour a month. As long as she's there, you've got a chance of success. If you're doing it yourself, you'll fail. Trust me, you will fail, and it will be sore.
That's great. Now that brings up another question. So, somebody who's starting off, somebody, we already discussed about, it may not be the right idea to look for raising money on your day one, but how, if you don't have a lot of money, how do you assemble this team of dream executives or people who are really accomplished and who can help you? How do you do that as a person who's just starting off?
What you have to do is you have to get help. So if I think about how would I advise a young entrepreneur today to get a good team, I would sit down with them and say, look, you're going to want to get people who are older than you involved, people you don't know. But those people used to be you. And when we're in our 50s, we meet a lot of people in our 50s. But what excites us is the 22-year-old who's running the company. That's who we want to work with, because we learn so much from them. We live off their energy. We love it. So you've got to understand that the 22-year-old, being young is actually an advantage, and you've got to play that advantage. So if the 22-year-old phones me up and goes, hey, Russell, I know you do a lot of work in film. I've got this fantastic piece of technology for film. It would be great to have a chat with you about it. And then who can you refer me to, Russell, who you think would be excited about what I'm doing? I'm going, well, I could tell you that person and that person. The other thing I would do is not to pay people, because people who are successful don't really need the money. What they want to do is to get involved for the journey. You do this yourself. You just want to get the buzz of seeing people being successful. That's what we want, because that's the reward in life. The money comes because everybody makes money when there's success. So I would say that young people have to understand the advantage they have and not to think about the disadvantage. And if they think about that, then they will succeed. And they sit there on LinkedIn, build themselves the best LinkedIn profile they could imagine, prove they're reliable, and do it. And there's one thing that differentiates a good young entrepreneur from a not so good one. And I'll tell you what happens is the best entrepreneurs I've met have sat down with me and said, Russell, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm thinking about doing that. What's your advice? And it could be they want to work with angel investors. And in Scotland, we have some of the best angel investors, superb people. So what I will do is I will sit down with the young entrepreneur and I'll say, you should do this, you should do this, and you should do this. I'll give them 3 pieces of advice. If the next morning they drop me a note and they say, Russell, I've done those 3 things, what should I do next? I'll work with them.
I see.
Only 1% will do that. Yeah. 99% will forget about it or do it and not tell me, but 1% will come back. And my experience is the 1% that come back are brilliant, and you want to grab their coattails. Has that been your experience?
It's definitely my experience. I give advice, and people are very happy with that advice. But as you said, the percentage of people which follow through is very, very small. Is very small. I find it very interesting.
Yeah. So if I was to make if I was to say, I know someone you should speak to and do the introduction, you would do it.
Yeah, of course.
You would do that as doing something that, well, a large percentage of people don't do it, and I don't know why. I can't explain it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I find the more conversations I have with more diverse people, the better understanding I have, because we all have blind spots, and I just love talking to people and understanding what they are going through, because that informs me of what kind of problems exist in the world.
I think there's another thing as well. It's about energy and peace. So I notice for a lot of business people, they qualify themselves out of opportunities for no reason. So I spoke to someone today and I said to them, oh, I can help you. I love what you're doing. I will write an article and put it on LinkedIn. I have a lot of followers on LinkedIn. They'll be really interested in what you're doing. Yeah. And the person said to me, we're designing a new website. Could you wait until September to do that? Wow. And I said, no, I'm going to do it now or never do it. Let's not assume that people aren't going to like you because of your website. Nobody might read the article, but let's do it now. Let's do it today. Let's get some energy in it. And she agreed, and it's been a great success.
Yeah, no, I have so many stories like that. In March, I met somebody, and he's a brilliant guy, like a comedian, and he creates all these nice arts and all that. And he was struggling, he was not making money, and so I told him, why don't you go to Etsy.com and sell it? And he goes, yeah, I have an Etsy account. Okay, I will get it done by 30th. I'm like, right now is the first. You're gonna take 1 month to upload 2 pictures. Like, get it done in 2 hours. Like, what is the problem? And then I kept going back to him. I was like, okay, is it done or not? And then he got involved in something else. But then by the end of the day, he got it done. So I was like, oh, I didn't even realize it takes that little effort to get it going, yeah. Right? And a lot of people just have these mental barriers, and I don't understand them.
It's interesting to understand. I have a mental barrier. So because when I was a child, I was brought up in schools where if you made a mistake in school, someone would hit you on the hand with a ruler. Right? So I was brought up that way. So because my body is conditioned to make mistake, get hit, it kind of stops me taking risks. So I discovered that I had a problem with MailChimp. I would write a newsletter and it was all ready to send. And then this big gorilla finger, the big gorilla finger on MailChimp, I found I couldn't press that. It was, because was it really right? I'll double check it again. So I solved the problem because I have one member of my, so what I do now is I write the newsletter and I pass it on to my team member to send it. So they just send it. And it's a really silly example, but just watching that finger go like that and I couldn't press it. And I had a brilliant example of that, which was we were working with a client and he'd written half a newsletter to go on MailChimp, but wasn't happy with it and it was taking forever. And he accidentally pressed the send button. So it was only half a newsletter. It was only half a message, but he sent it. Yeah. And we got two inquiries that afternoon.
I see.
So it was by taking action that we achieved something. It's a great memory.
Very true.
But understanding your own limitations and avoiding them is good.
Exactly. Now I want to, we are almost over time, but I want to ask this question. How do you see this world is going to change, especially business is going to change with this whole COVID situation? International travel may be affected, hospitality will be affected. So what are your views overall? How will the economy be affected by all this?
So our world is going through change in a way we didn't expect. So for the entrepreneur and the small business, this provides opportunities. You could be in a sector which is going to be badly affected. So what I suggest you do is stop and switch to a different sector. But it's all about doing research and understanding where the opportunities could be. So I don't know if I'll be able to fly to the States later this year. But I do know if I can't fly, I can do events like this. I can do it online. So I'm not going to worry about what I can't control. What I'm going to try to do is to find the opportunities that exist because of what's happened. So the problems are terrible. This has been a health emergency. And the most important thing is people's health. So I will follow the guidance that I'm given. During the first 2 months of this year, I flew 12,000 miles. I haven't done 200 miles in the last 2 months, right? So I've seen that change, but I've adapted, and adapting is so important. So I think the advantage for everyone is that we've adopted digital technology. So you can use digital technology to speak to anyone, anywhere in the world, and they're likely to respond positively to that. So I wouldn't worry about what we can't control. I would worry about I would think about the opportunity that arises because of this.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. Yeah, these are really, really on point, and I hope people really try to understand what you're saying and implement it in their lives. It has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Now, if people want to connect with you, if they want to reach out, what is the best way to connect with you?
Well, I think my email's on this, or they can connect with me through LinkedIn. LinkedIn works really well. So that's the way I would suggest. And if someone wants to ask me a question, ask, and I'll try to help.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll put that link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you for all the good work you do for so many others.
Thank you so much. Thanks.